Welcome.
To the joy of coding.
Hello, and welcome to episode 424 of The Joy of Coding. My name is Mike Conley. I'm so glad to have you here. Going to be live hacking on some Firefox stuff. It's 2026. We begin our brand new year. It's cold where I am. I'm in Toronto. I'm in Canada. It's a little rainy. It's freezing rain. It's cold out. It's a bit gross and damp. But here we are. We begin our year. It's going to be a good one. Let's get started. Hey, yeah, it's January 7th, 2026. It's weird to say that. Episode 424. A reminder, no plan survives breakfast. I think I know what I want to do during this stream. I have a generalized idea of what I want to do. But it might go completely wrong. It might go completely sideways. I also just remembered there's something I wanted to mention. Air Mozilla transcript tool. Okay, yeah, no plan survives breakfast. I don't know how this is going to go, but we're just going to figure it out as it happens. This is pretty free form. None of the things that I'm going to write or I've pre-written, etc., etc., etc. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the agenda that we're looking at, or if I had just applied the exported flag, and now if I run this, hopefully that will now be available to you. Let me just double check. Episode agenda. There it is. There it is. What? Where is that? Oh, that's the Twitch thing. And that image is really large. Can I make that smaller? How do I make that smaller? Oh boy. Am I able to do that in, like, I've given instructions here to do that. Does that somehow translate to? Not really. Oh boy. Oh, I see. It tries to put in some kind of tag. And how does this interpret it? I'll bet you, yeah, the tags are getting stripped. All right, well, let's not do the image at all then, or at least I'll link to the image. What was the image before? Can I copy review file? Recognize handwritten? I'll just put the image. Is this? How do you do image in? I don't remember how to do this. Okay, well, this is already going sideways, but the agenda's up there. I think what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk a little bit. Okay, yeah, I wanted to start with the I've been doing this since, like, I think the very beginning of the 400 series of episodes, where I will attempt to associate the episode number with the HTTP error code. We're going to learn about that error code. And the image that I was just trying to make smaller and failed was from the associated Keanu code, which is failed dependency. And this is an image from, it looks like a Scanner Darkly, I think is what the name of this movie was called. And I'm not sure what failed dependency is. Let's read up on what the rule is. We'll educate ourselves before moving on. 424, failed dependency. The HTTP 424 failed dependency error response status code indicates that the method could not be performed on the resource because the requested action depended on another action and that action failed. Regular web servers typically do not return the status code, but some protocols like WebDAV can return it. For example, if a prop patch request was issued, and that is like if you are modifying a resource, then one command fails, then automatically every other command will also fail with failed dependency. Oh, I see. So some protocols can. So this seems pretty specific to the WebDAV like standard or specification. If you've got a whole bunch of requests happening, kind of like one command fails, then automatically every other command prop patch. Yeah, all right. Well, it seems pretty unusual. This is not the sort of thing that I think you could expect really to receive. It seems pretty specialized to WebDAV. So I jumped down here. I got a little distracted by the large Keanu image, but now we've learned about HTTP code 424. I'm going to zip back up and say the agenda that we're looking at. Depending on where you're watching this, is going to be available to you in a different location. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's down there in the video description. On Airmozilla, it's over there in the details section. On Twitch, it's down there in the channel details. And there's an episode guide, and you can check it out. In fact, the next thing I wanted to mention, and Happy New Year to yourself, Smurf D, is we were working on something at the end of last year. This tool that was going to like make it easier to search my streams based on the transcripts. And I was originally going to see, well, can we like use Whisper locally to do speech to text? Like I was going to revive Adzo to have it pull down videos from Airmozilla, strip the audio out, run it through Whisper to produce transcripts, convert those transcripts into like a searchable form, like throw them into some kind of index that can be searched. And what we discovered, especially late in that episode, was that Airmozilla actually already does this and makes it possible for you to download the transcripts if you know what you're doing. And so I started to hack out a tool. It mostly happened after the episode ended. Actually, I was stuck on it. I hacked out a tool that goes and downloads the transcripts, and then I built out a prototype of a search index. I think I was originally going to use something called Solr, S-O-L-R, but I ended up using something called, oh man, what was it called? Was it called PageFind? PageFind. Yeah, I used PageFind, and this was much better. It was much simpler than using Elasticsearch or Solr, and it can all be done statically. You generate it once, and I'd include it in the assets that go to the Joy of Coding episode guide. So that work in progress is happening. The stumbling block I ran into is that some of the videos and some of the transcripts on Airmozilla aren't actually public for some reason. And I don't know how many people watch the archived streams of the Joy of Coding on Airmozilla. I suspect most of my traffic's on YouTube for watching past recordings. But Airmozilla is kind of like the canonical repository of these episodes, and there are a whole bunch from back in the day, from back when we ran our own service for serving videos. And those videos have the wrong permission set on them, so I can't actually use the tool to pull down the transcript. So I'm working with the Airmozilla team and the Panopto people to try and get those opened up. So yeah, I mean, this is kind of like a late-breaking discovery for me that some of the ancient episodes from like like episode, I think 70 is the one I noticed, like that one's not available. And then there's like a whole bunch of them that are not available. And so I have to figure out what's going on there. Right, so the transcript tool. Once I've got the permissions set up, I'll show you, and we can like execute it against the ones that haven't been downloaded yet. We'll rerun it. We'll get all the transcripts. We'll do the index. I'll show you all the stuff I built. But I'll wait until the video permission stuff is figured out. So moving on, I was thinking we could look at something else today. So as some of you might be aware, I work on the new tab page. This is what the new tab page looks like for me. It's going to look different for different people. I have it configured in a very specific way. This is what most people in the United States would see. This is what we call sections. Sections will be coming to Canada, and I believe parts of, I think we're hoping to get it spun out for England, Ireland, Canada, maybe some parts of the EU in the next couple of weeks. Part of the reason why it's taking so long is we have to like build up the tooling in those regions to build up these different categories. And there are a whole bunch of categories. Like before, like by default, if you... Here, let me open a terminal here. If I run a brand new instance of Firefox, we're going to launch with a temporary profile. Oh, I'm using a debug build. Nope. Sorry, I wanted an artifact build. you get sort of like this grid, a potpourri of stories. So these could be about literally anything. You've got something about video games here, and you've got like archaeology and sports. It's all kind of this potpourri. And, we've received some pretty strong feedback from users that for the people that are interested in stories, they want them to be more relevant to them. They want to be able to pick and choose what they see. And so we're slowly but surely categorizing them and then allowing you to pick and choose the topics that interest you. So you can say like, oh yeah, I'm interested. Like I chose long reads. I like these long reads articles. Maybe you're interested in gaming and health, but maybe you're not interested in seeing food or parenting. Maybe you're not a parent. You can like turn off that particular topic. We want to allow people to pick and choose the stories that they see. But that involves categorizing the stories that we crawl the web for and find. We use RSS to find these stories, and we need to categorize them properly. And some of them span multiple categories, and so we have to like do a bit of work there. And so we've done that work for the stories that are sourced from the United States. We have to do the same thing for the stories that are sourced from these other regions. Canada and I think England and Ireland are next. And then slowly but surely we'll expand further and further across the world. But so I just launched Firefox with a new profile. I'll do that again. That's using this temp profile argument. And what happens is the mock run tool just like creates a profile from scratch. Now normally what you'd see is actually about welcome. You'd see this. And it would walk you through, importing your data from another browser, maybe pinning the browser to your dock on macOS or on your taskbar on Windows. It'd walk you through some stuff, maybe signing into an account. But after you're done that, or maybe even if you skip all that stuff, you just get this as your homepage and your new tab page from there forward. That's what it looks like. And so you get like a series of sponsored tiles for your region. You get a series of these like default tiles, and you get a series of stories that are for your region maybe interesting, like they're somewhat regionalized. It knows that I'm in Canada, and so it's like, oh well, maybe in Canada these stories are interesting to you, and they'll be different. Maybe it knows what language I read, so it's offering them in English. But if you were in say Singapore or maybe in, Japan, you'd probably get Japanese stories and things that are regionalized, interesting in Japan. But one of the things that we hypothesize is that the first 48 hours of a new profile, like a new install of Firefox, is that these stories and these top sites are not what's most useful about the browser. I'll speak for myself and say that I do find the stories interesting whenever I've got a free moment, maybe after work or I'm on lunch break and I'm just looking for something to read. These stories are actually kind of interesting, especially if there's like breaking news, something that I feel like I should know or care about. That'll usually flow up pretty quickly to popular today. Like I think I found out about there was a Rob Reiner, the director. I found out about that because of it floating to the top of popular today, a story about the death of him and his wife. But also like other world news, like what's happened recently. Oh yeah, the Venezuela thing. I learned about that here as well. So like lots of stuff that you can learn about that I'll speak for myself and say I'm interested in. But when you first install a browser, chances are, our hypothesis is that you have a task in mind that you don't necessarily want to just browse news necessarily, that you probably install the browser because there's something that you want to do. Maybe you want to do, maybe someone recommended Firefox and said, this is where, this is a more private browser, this is a faster browser, this is a more stable browser, and so you can do the thing that you want to do. Maybe it's banking, maybe it's shopping, maybe it's whatever tasks you're doing. Maybe you're like the variety of things that people do with browsers is vast. It's effectively an operating system at this point. What do people do with an operating system? They run programs on them. What do people do with a browser? They browse the web with them, and the web is large and varied. But we suspect that during the first 48 hours, the chances of you wanting to view one of these things or one of these things is low. That's the hypothesis. We don't know that for sure, but that's the hypothesis. And the other hypothesis is that the noise, the sort of the visual noise of all of these stories and these top sites and these icons, the colors, is it's sufficiently noisy to be overwhelming. It's like pushing you away during a critical moment, those first 48 hours. This is our time to make a good first impression and be useful and allow you to go do the things like import from your other browser or sign into an account or set some bookmarks or something, like to do browser-y things before we start offering you like, hey, maybe you want to see a story. One of the things that this top site stuff does over time is like as you browse the web, we use a what's called the frequency formula to surface the sites that you tend to visit frequently and most recently. And we use like some simple heuristics to be like, okay, around this time of day, you tend to go to, I don't know, your work's intranet portal because you're on a work device or something, or your calendar. You're there every day. This time you open your calendar. And so we try and surface those things in top sites to make it easier for you to get there on time or to get there without having to like type stuff into the URL bar. But when you are just starting out with a brand new profile, in the first 48 hours, you don't have any browsing history. So all of this stuff is just like, well, we think these sites are interesting. And I think we've got like different interesting sites for different regions, but we're just having a guess. We're just making a guess that because I'm in Toronto, Wikipedia, YouTube, Reddit, and maybe downloading some add-ons might be interesting. And so we think we can do better. Here's what we're thinking. During the first 48 hours of a new install, this isn't like a new profile, like if I had created a profile from the profile management interface that is curiously not available here. I don't know why. Oh, because I ran it with the temp profile thing. Instead of overwhelming you with all of these things, we, during the first 48 hours, we suppress the shortcuts and we just show you the search and the logo, and maybe weather. Like, well, if weather's available. Now, we want you to be able to turn those other things on. Maybe you know what you're doing. Maybe you're like, whoa. I want those top sites, or I want those stories. We certainly, during those first 48 hours, want you to be able to turn these things on. And then off again, if you'd like. But this is what we're thinking as maybe the very first experience after you open a new tab, after welcome, is like a really clean look. So it's not so noisy, and you can do the thing you want to do, like go to your bank or go shopping or do whatever it is that you do on the internet. So how would we do that? And it sounds simple, right? Well, you pref it off, and then after 48 hours, you pref them on. Well, hold on a second, because depending on the region that you're in, these might not even be available. So that's one thing to be like. Shortcuts are available everywhere, but we don't have stories for all regions. So that's a thing to keep in mind, is we can't just like turn them on willy-nilly. We have to make sure that we're in a region where turning them on makes sense. Also, what happens if a user is in that 48-hour window and they turn them on and then they turn them off again? Well, you know, what should we do after the 48-hour period? The user expressed an intent of turning it off. And so after 48 hours, we're going to turn them back on again? That sounds kind of user hostile. We want to respect what the user chose. And so part of the requirements here is if the user makes an active choice on and then off, that we keep the selection that the user made. So what are we going to do? It may not surprise you to hear that these values are stored in preferences, that the preferences system, which is a very like a glorified key value store inside of Firefox. What you may not know, like if you've ever gone to About Config, I think we can actually see here this one here. We're gonna focus on this one. Ignore the second entry here. This is just to sync the setting. But like if it's set to true, we show stories. If we set this pref to false, the stories go away. And that, I want you to notice something, is that whenever I turn them off here, it's false. When I reset, it's not bold. Like when I double click it, it becomes bold. When I reset it, it becomes not bold. Now, whenever I go in here and I turn them off, it's bold. And when I turn them back on, not bold. But I think this is true. If I go to services, prefs, set bool pref, and set that to true, I thought that was going to do something different. Well, let me explain my thinking. There are prefs is a sort of a dumb key value store, a very efficient in-memory key value store that periodically flushes to disk. There are problems with it, but one of the interesting things about it is that it has a notion of a default value and a user set value. And you can get access to the default value and set the default value without changing the user set value. And that sounds very interesting. That sounds like exactly what we want. That during the first 48 hours, we may want to change this default value to false. And then whatever the user chooses in that time will be the user set value. And like that, I have some crash reports. Okay. No, this is a local build. If the user sets a value, we set that as the user value. And then after the 48-hour changes, we change the default value. But if the user had set a value in the meantime, we pay attention to that. That's the idea. And so my question is, will this even support that? How do we set the default value? Let's see if this will work. That's my thinking. And if this works as sort of like a high-level sketch, how can we build this logic into the browser? And how do we experiment with this? We don't know if this 48-hour thing is going to be worth doing at all. We want to probably experiment with it. So turn it on for a small set of the population who install Firefox for the first time and see whether or not they retain better, whether or not their user sentiment is better. They're like, oh, it was so much cleaner. Or like, we'll test it in the lab and we'll test it in the wild. So how do we change the default value? So let's open up the console here, and I'll show you what I've learned so far. So we have the pref service, and what we can do is we can get the default branch of a pref. And what you're supposed to do, I think, is you supply it with, like most things in computers, it ultimately comes down to trees. This is a leaf node in a tree, and the branches in this tree are delineated with the periods. So there is a browser node, and it has a branch to something called new tab page, and it has a branch called something called activity stream, which has a branch feeds, which has a branch section, which has a branch top stories. And so what default section or get default branch is looking for is, what is the name of the node under which you want the default nodes, the default leaves. And strangely, you have to supply the period at the end. I think that's true. If I don't supply period at the end, what happens? Can I still get it? Maybe I'm wrong. Get bool pref feeds section top stories. Is it smart enough to? Yeah, it doesn't know what I mean. But if I put the period here, then it does. So I can get the Boolean pref here. I can also set the Boolean pref. Now, watch the boldness. Watch the boldness. This is not bold. Remember that if I manually set it, it becomes bold. Now I'm going to set the bool pref on the default branch I have to supply a value to false. Notice it is not bold. It is not bold. If, however, I now go in here and I say turn on stories, now it is bold. Now what happens if I turn it off again? Let's go over here and I turn it off again. Not bold. And then if I go here and set the default value to true, then it's true, and then it's turned on again. So it's not exactly what I want, I think. That's annoying. I would have expected that if you set a value, even if it matches the default value on the branch, that it becomes the user value and it doesn't just revert to the default value. That's annoying. Let's see if there's some way around that. Let's take a look at the pref branch interface. Pref type, set bool pref, get char pref, set char pref, get set, get int, set, complex value. Lock pref. Pref has user value. If a preference was manually set to a value that equals the default value, then the preference is no longer has a user set value. It is considered reset to its default value. In particular, this method will return false for such a preference, and the preference will not be saved to a file. So it sounds like what I want isn't really supported. Any user value, the preference may not be present in a subprocess. Okay, not quite. Get child list. So it sounds like what I might want is I was really hoping to avoid adding yet another pref. Can I check what value the user has set? Yeah, like the problem is I can't distinguish whether or not the user set it or it's just the default. Like if I go over here and I set the default value to false, and then I set the pref to true this way, I can definitely tell that the user set that. But if they turn it off again, the value in preferences here is in the default state. It considers the fact that the user reverted it back to the default state as not a user value, but as the default value. So that's annoying. So what am I going to do? Because ideally, and I'm this is definitely an edge case. This is definitely an edge case, but it does feel like the sort of thing where if you get this wrong, some people are going to fall into this and this is going to annoy them. If they turn a thing on, and then they turn it off, and then it suddenly turns on them, that is going to upset them if they had turned it off before. So what you want maybe is to notice if it's turned off during the 48-hour period. And if it is, keep it off when we switch over, when we change the threshold. So let's start writing some stuff down. I don't have a bug for this yet, but create a 48-hour window where top sites and stories are disabled by default, but abide by user choice. Abide by user choice. So requirements. Let's write this down real quick. Get some ideas here. During the first 48 hours of a new install profile, so not a profile, a new selected profile, change the default value of the top stories and top sites prefs to false if so we actually also want to add a new pref. Add a new experiment or a new Nimbus feature configuration for this capability. When enabled, when this capability is enabled during the first 48 hours of a new install profile. Change the default value of the top stories and top sites pref to false change the default value of the top sites pref to false if we're less than 48 hours old. The user turns on top sites and top stories during the 48-hour period. Let them. If the user turns off subsequently, turns off top sites and top stories during that 48-hour period, remember that they did this. During the 48-hour, when the 48-hour period ends, if the user had turned off top sites or top stories after having manually turned them on, remember this and use that setting. Otherwise, for either pref, for both prefs, switch the defaults to on if the region supports it. For top stories. That's tricky. We're going to need tests for that. But I think that's what we have to do. And ideally, clear any intermediate prefs that were set to remember the off state edge case, because those won't be necessary anymore. So, some things to research. Can we determine if we're a new selectable profile or a new install? I suspect we can, but I have to figure out how that works. What does profile age, how does profile age work? And what are its performance characteristics? That's a module that I'm aware of that will allow us to know how old a profile is. So we should check to see how that works. Where is the best place to check profile age, profile state during startup, during new tab initialization? Probably activity stream, right? And then just thinking here. What's the best place to check? And then what should the prefs be to remember the off after on edge case, and how should that work? Probably in prefs feed, or maybe a dedicated early user feed. So if you're not sure what a feed is, it's basically the way new tab is structured. We have all these things called feeds. Effectively, they are like a vertical that tie into a particular part of the browser and have a specific sort of domain of responsibility that are then feed into the Redux object that is sent down to the new tab. They supply the reducer actions. And then when should we check for crossing the 48-hour window? Every new tab open? Maybe. At some point, someone's going to cross that window while they're running the browser. Would that be shocking? Or should we wait until the next restart? I think that's something I need to ask. That's something I need to ask product management about. Okay, so I think I want to try and answer some of these first couple of questions today. Can we determine if we're a new selectable profile versus a new install? I think we can do that. And I know we can do that because there is something called the first startup module, which I have worked on before. And it does receive this argument, new profile. And where does that come from? First startup.init. Is there any other place where that's called? No. Different values because the milestone. So intentionally tell to leave the milestone alone when doing this check. Override. Need homepage override. Determines whether a homepage override is needed. True if we should update the milestone prefs after comparing. New profile, new mstone, and new build ID. Oh, I see. Now, whenever it is checking to see if we have a new profile, how's it doing it? Homepage override milestone. Was there a prior saved milestone? I don't think it's differentiating between new selectable profile and new profile. How does the selectable profile stuff, when you create a new profile, like if I create a new, let's create a new one here. I get this. I get about new profile. And I'm just going to call this like temporary. And give it green. Your new profile is good to go. Okay, so I got sent to about new profile. How did that work? Launch instance and you tell it where to go. I see. Create profile. Profile name. You make a directory. Creates a profile directory. We create the directory, and we say create profile initial files. Create the times and write that the create timestamp and first use is null. So we create a times file that it was created and first use is null. We create prefs and we say profiles enabled, profiles created, profile name updated, store ID. Set in newly created profiles. So I'm actually curious to know if I like launch If I create a new profile, like this was created with temp profile. What's set for these? Browser.profiles. Enabled is true. Created doesn't exist. Profile name updated. False. Store ID. Some identifier. And then DAO group pref name. I don't know what that means. And then a line break. So we might be able to read those prefs to determine whether or not we're in a new profile, like a newly created selectable profile or not. I mean, we might also be able to just ask the service. Like if I am in here, what does the selectable profile service give us? Current profile. No. Store ID. Let me shut that down, and then let's launch a normal one without temp profile. Selectable profile service dot store ID. So a store ID does exist, and then current profile is null. What does that mean when it's null? Selectable profile service. Whoops, wrong. Profile service. Current profile. What does it mean if it's null? Group toolkit profile. Current profile. If this isn't the first init prior to creating the first new profile in the app started, we should have found a current profile. There are other profiles. Recreate the current profile. I see. So if current profile is null, and maybe I want to double check this, that might also be a way of, is there a profile service? Basic architecture. Okay. Profiles dash store service. Profiles are store ID. When a new selectable profile is created, the service is responsible for initializing a new profile with the same store ID. Is stored in profiles and in store ID. Each selectable profile gets its own profile root and profile local directories as usual. Path property update to represent the most recently used profile in the group. When the user has multiple profiles in a group open simultaneously, these updates can happen frequently. Okay, so I need to ask. Almost certainly yes. Maybe by checking the prefs set here, and then I'm going to supply. This isn't my favorite. It's very like, oh, you're sniffing some details there. I don't like that. Or even better, checking if selectable profile service dot current profile returns null for the current profile, which my like default install here, if I do selectable profile service current profile, okay, so like I get one, and just reading through the source of selectable profile service, current profile, it looks like it only gets set if we create one. or on initialization we find that one exists. Right. Okay. So that seems likely. I feel good about that. Let's check how profile age works now. Traverse the contents of the profile directory, find the oldest file, and return its creation timestamp. Profile age, access to times. This is separate from the provider. Simplify testing, and enable extraction to shared location in the future. If first use and it's null, indicates that this is a new profile that needs a first use timestamp. Profile path created. There are two ways we can get creation time from on this JSON file by calculating from the file system. If we have to calculate, we use the file system the first time and then we persist it to disk. Compute and persist created. Returns a promise that resolves to the profile's creation time. So this returns a promise. Returns a promise that first use of the profile. Recovered from backup. I think I wrote this stuff. Map of profile directory. Promise resolves the profile age. So how does this work? We compute, we get the oldest profile timestamp. On a brand new profile, we'll iterate all of the files in the profile and find the one that is the oldest. Kind of silly, eh? But okay. But then subsequent checks will will use the cached value because that value doesn't change over time. So when is profile age created used? UI tour, get app info, and profiles parent. It's not used a lot. Profile created weeks ago. App info, get app info. Put it here. We also have Zool app info, vendor name, ID, version, build name, source, update URL, created. I'm just looking to see if there's like anything else that might tell us in a cheaper way when a profile was created. It wouldn't surprise me if there were multiple ways of calculating this. Wow, okay. Yeah, it'd probably be under Toolkit if it existed. That Toolkit profile service. Okay, let's take a look at that. And I think that's probably it. Oh, right. Profile migrator. Yeah. Profile, default profile, current profile. Does the NSI toolkit profile, what is that? Get profile descriptor. NSI toolkit profile has the directory, the timestamp of an existing profile lock at lock time. Oh, that's on a profile lock. And then here, store ID, selector, remove. Lock this profile. Huh. All right. So, unfortunately, what this does is that it checks the profile directory for a times.json file, and within it, a created entry. If one doesn't exist, the entire the profile directory is iterated, checking for the oldest file, and this is then written and to created and returned as profile age.created as a promise resolution. Subsequent checks are certainly cheaper. Profile age, if I remember correctly, when does it load the file? I think it loads it once on demand, right? Construct path, get profile path, created. When is this dot underscore times? Impl times equals time. So new profile age impl IC. So init profile age when you returns a promise. It resolves to an instance of profile age will always return the same instance for every call of the same profile. How does that work? So what is exported? Oh, it's just a function. So how does profile age? Let's see how it works. Let's look inside. Yeah, profile age. You await it, and then you await created. How is it used inside of here? Okay. How's it used here? It's interesting, it's already used over here. Retrieve profile age. Topic selection. During onboarding, I think a lot of this can be removed. We don't do the topic selection dialog anymore. No one was using that. But it looks like we were willing to do that. Okay. Okay, where's the best place to check the state? It's probably here. Because what we're looking for is a way to block the loading of new tab until these things have been evaluated. Now there's also a new lazy.activity stream. Init. This is async. We init activity stream. Hang on. Init. We broadcast this. What do we have for async? Not a lot. Okay. So it's really in here where we might do like some lazy-ish things. We might actually want to do like any promise deferrals or promise awaitings in here. So you construct it, and maybe you do like init and then any async init. Await async init and then init. What's an init? Just so I know. Set a bunch of prefs. So this is like the right place, I think. Do a bunch of things and you initialize. Default prefs in it. This might be this default prefs. Sorry, no, default prefs. I kind of wonder if maybe we want to supply the profile age as an argument here. That might make testing easier too. So that, I think, is a question that I need to get answered for whether or not the 48-hour window can, when you cross it, if we want to wait until the next browser restart. Like, do we want to do that 48-hour window check just at the beginning or like for every new tab open? I think I need to get that answered. Okay. Second. Hang on a second. Someone's asking me something I need to get. Yeah. Okay, so I need to get that answered, and then here's how it would work. Here's what I'm thinking. Let's just start sketching this a little bit. inside of, let's assume that we want to make the decision once during browser startup and not for each check, and not for each new tab open. Let's assume for now. And what I can imagine us doing is inside of, what is it? About new tab? About new tab. .sys.mjs. Before instantiating activity stream, we check to see if we're in the we supply the profile age to the init function and store it and cache it for quick access, quick synchronous access. Then in, where would it be? If it's not prefs feed, in activity stream, or maybe default prefs or prefs feed, we check to see if we're in a selectable profile, in the first profile of a new install, and we see if we're in the 48-hour window, and if the 48-hour window characteristic is capability is enabled. If so, if so, set the default values of the two prefs to false. And set some kind of flag indicating that we're in the 48-hour window. If either of those two prefs are set to true or false, are set by the user to false, during the 48-hour window period, write a new temporary pref for each to indicate this. On startup, if we see that we're not in the 48-hour period, and we see prefs indicating that the set the defaults to true, unless we see prefs indicating that the user had set the story's top sites to false manually during the 48-hour period, in which case persist those choices and then clear those prefs. I think that's how I'd want to work. It's pretty Rube Goldberg-y. But I think he gets us what we want. So let me just I'm gonna reach out to someone right now. Maybe I can get an answer. Oh, Danny Colin is referring to my t-shirt. I don't know if you can see this. I can't even see myself. Hold on, let me pull up OBS. I'm wearing a very rare picture-in-picture t-shirt. Oh! Boop! boop. Breaking news. Breaking news. I'm going to give you... You heard it here first, folks. I think the Firefox 147 beta... Where are the... What train is it now? If you go to what train is it now, you can see... We're in RC week. Firefox 147 is shipping next week, next Tuesday. Oh, there's crashes. Oh, boy. You know what? Okay, I'm not going to look at those right now. But 147 is going to release next week, and we can see the current beta notes. We can check out what's coming. So we're getting web GPU support on all Mac OS versions on devices with Apple Silicon. So if you're a Mac user, there you go. A zero copy video of hardware decoded video with AMD GPUs. So that's going to greatly improve video playback on a number of systems. I think people who've been having a hard time with YouTube, I think this will really help. This is for all you Linux nerds out there. Firefox now supports the freedesktop.org XDG-based directory specification. So we'll behave more like a good citizen, a free desktop citizen on your Linux distros that happen to pay attention or care about XDG-based directory specification. We're updating safe browsing. But this is the part that I think is pretty cool and that Danny Cullen reminded me of. So this is something that's been available in labs for a while, which is a feature to automatically open a pip player window if the tab is ever backgrounded. So for example, here I'll go to, well, first of all, it's off by default. You have to go to settings, and then under, I think it's browsing, under picture-in-picture, keep playing videos in picture-in-picture when switching tabs. You can turn that on, and then if you go to YouTube, let's look for like, I don't know, what's a fun video? Keyboard Cat. Classic. And here's an ad. But if I switch tabs, oh, it's because it won't do it for an ad. Hold on a second. Let's wait for the ad to complete. Come on, we want to see us some Keyboard Cat. All right. So we've got Keyboard Cat here. I'm going to switch tabs, and boom, it automatically opens as a picture-in-picture player window. If I don't want it, I'll like close it. It'll go away. And if I switch back, and then if it's not playing, it won't foreground. But if it's playing, it'll foreground like that. And then if you switch back to it while it was opened like that, it'll go back into the tab. But if you had opened it with the toggle like this, then switching back and forth between the tabs does nothing. So that is a feature that was actually contributed by a volunteer contributor named Danielle Furla, who contributed it, I think, last year or so. And we kind of refined it, worked on it, and we had to adjust some of the rules. Some people thought it was like, though it was opening for ads and stuff, so we had to like add some special rules to it. And we think it's reached the point where it seems to be useful. Like, I have it on by default, and I like it. A number of people had opted into it with labs. And so it's graduating from labs. If you'd had it on before, it should stay on. You shouldn't notice the difference. But it's no longer listed under labs. So if you go to labs, it's no longer under there. But if you've never had it on and you're curious, then starting in beta 147, you'll be able to turn it on under the browsing section here. You can just flick the preference here. So this is a big deal. I helped mentor Danielle getting this written. It's really cool to see a major feature like that being written almost entirely by a volunteer, just out because they thought it was neat. And he was great. He wrote a bunch of tests. Like, it's a very robust feature. It was well architected. Good job, Danielle. Yeah, there's other stuff coming too. Site isolation. Oh, wow. Really kind of burying the lead there. They're turning on not Spectre. They're turning on site isolation protection, basically Fission on Android. So that's good. That also means that we can start turning off some of the Spectre mitigations. Because some of those mitigations I think had performance implications. And here's stuff that's been fixed. Yeah, so it's a nice build. Now, it's been a long time. Oh, wow. There's also like all this web platform stuff. Wow, it's been pretty pretty beefy update, especially considering that the window that it was being worked on, for the most part, the nightly cycle of 147 was 4 weeks. The beta cycle is long, so a good chunk of the beta cycle, it was actually a bunch of people were on holiday. But yeah, the nightly cycle was a normal one. If you've been paying attention to the sort of the release cadence and stuff, this is a weird time of year. Because of holidays, we kind of break the 4-week model. We stretch out some of the cycles because people go on leave, and we don't want to, like, if they're on holiday, we don't want to accidentally cause incidents and bring people back in. So 148 on nightly had a 5-week nightly cycle, and it's going to have a 6-week beta cycle. So 149 is going to be on nightly for 6 weeks, and then after that, then we go back to the 4 weeks. I don't exactly know why this one is going to be 6 weeks long, but yeah, it is 149 is going to kind of have a longer gestation period. Why did I go down that path? Oh, because Danny Colin pointed at my t-shirt. What I wanted to do was ask someone, XT. I wanted to ask, hey, remind me, after the 48-hour period passes, want to show the top sites and stories again. But is that after a browser restart, or like if I'm running my browser and I cross the 48-hour threshold and I open a new tab, should it then show the top sites and top stories all of a sudden? Okay, so I'm going to ask that person. It would be really nice if we didn't have to check it every time, because then I don't have to put like the checking logic inside of like Activity Stream. I can leave the checking logic inside of About New tab, which already does the well, actually it doesn't change it too much, because we'd still only need to calculate it at the very beginning, like pull it off the disk and then cache the creation date, and then we could check it every time. And that's cheap. So I don't think it really changes much now that I think about it. So long as Activity Stream, the class, retains a cached copy. And then it can check. So let's start breaking this down into to-dos. 1. Actually, I'll actually have this set up as checked off to-dos. We need a Nimbus feature flag to control its capability. Because this is happening early, I want to fix the bug where the make it so that Activity Stream initialization waits for Nimbus feature or Nimbus experiment store initialization, because right now there's a little bit of a race that we just discovered. I think we need to fix that as part of this. Add a Nimbus feature flag to control its capability, including the duration, the duration that we care about, defaulting to 48 hours. Okay, I've gotten an answer back. Any tab opened after the first 48 would be the new experience. Okay, so not requiring the restart. Got it. Okay, and I'll say thank you. Thanks. And then we want to add logic to About New tab to check profile age or creation timestamp and pass to activity stream in the init method. Cache the creation timestamp as a private, as a member, as a, sorry, no, I'm gonna make it as a public member. Well, that's interesting. Do any of the feeds reach back? Because like the activity stream class orchestrates the initialization of a bunch of feeds. Do the feeds, as a rule, do they ever reach back into activity stream? Yeah, here's one where it does. About new tab activity stream. So we could potentially just read it off of that. Okay. As a public member, okay. Public read only member. And then inside either prefs feed, I think we have to decide on this one, or default prefs, add logic. Oh, well. I don't want to be like constantly doing these checks every time we open a new tab for the case that we're still within the 48-hour window. Really only care about the moment when you're outside of it. So also cache a state flag indicating whether or not we're in the startup, the early profile state. So maybe we don't need the creation timestamp. Might be useful, but I'm gonna make this a private read-only private member. Cache a public state flag, and then inside of init, or maybe it'll be prefs feed. Prefs feed. What does it do? There's like an initialization in here. Initialization. Inside of prefs feed, on initialization, it's not a flag, it'd be like a member, or like a method. Have a public state method, that returns whether or not we're in an early profile, in the early profile state. Inside of prefs feed, on initialization, see if we're in the early profile state. And if so, set the defaults accordingly. If not, defaults accordingly. Every time we initialize a new tab, check the public method to see if we're in the early profile state. Check to see if we're in the early profile state. See if we're in the early set the defaults. Set a preference to indicate that we're in this state as well. We initialize new tab. Check the early profile pref. If true, check to see if we've exited the state. If so, clear the early profile pref, migrate any, change the defaults back. Change the defaults back. Set the pref top sites and top stories prefs to the off state if either had been toggled off during the early window state, early startup window period, early startup, not early startup, early profile period. Clear those state flags. And I think that's it. And then we might also use this transition as an opportunity to show a message in the new tab area. So make sure there's room to add that logic. Okay, I think that's how I want to approach it. I might end up having to work on this a little bit during outside of the stream. This isn't one of those that I think I'm going to work on just during the stream. But maybe what we can do right now is we can file the bug for this, and then you can follow along in that bug. New tab page. Add a capability that lets us disable, lets us set different defaults for top sites and top stories during the first 48 hours of a profile's lifetime. The default profile's lifetime. So during the first 48 hours of the default profile lifetime. So this shouldn't impact new selectable profiles. We want to be able to experiment with setting the default pref values for top sites and top stories enablement to false. We want users should still be able to pref those on during that 48-hour period. And if so, that should okay. I'll just say there. After the 48-hour period, we should change the defaults back, but ensure that if the user had expressed a preference to enable or disable those sections during the 48-hour period, that we respect that. What else? This experimental capability will default to using 48 hours as our threshold, but we want to be able to adjust that if need be via Nimbus. And the transition after 48 hours should not wait until the next restart. We should be checking every time the user opens a new tab if they were previously in the 48-hour window, to see if we should transition out of that state. We also need the ability to show a message to users after having transitioned out of that state. For example, hey, we turned these things on, because now that you've had a chance to get used to the browser, here's how you can control them. So I will file that as a task, and I will update this to that. That. We'll add the link to here. Okay, and we can we'll see how far I get with that before next week's episode. Excuse me. And if you want to follow along, the activity will be in this bug. So let me actually put a link to this bug in the agenda. So there you go. Oh, hang on. Copy Markdown. There you go. So that's in the agenda. Follow along if you want to check out what's going on in there over the next little while. And failing that, I should see you next week. Hey, thanks for watching episode 424 of The Joy of Coding. Let me know what you thought. Was that interesting? I know we didn't really write much code, but we did some thinking and did some planning. As an old mentor told me once, you know, a day of work can save you an hour of thought, which is a fun way of expressing it. So, yeah, let me know what you thought of this episode. I'll drop the link here I'll drop the link to rate this episode in the chat here. Link to rate this episode. A reminder, I read everything that comes in. That's a great way to let me know what you want to see more of, less of, what you want me to shift to. Maybe you don't care about any of this stuff, this new tab stuff. You want me to go talk about something else or explain a certain thing. Let me know what you want to see. Or if you have specific questions about the code or anything, if you can add them there. I read everything that comes in. I'll try and answer them on the stream. And with that, I'll call it. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching episode 424 of The Joy of Coding. I'll see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
The joy of coding.
See ya.